Rounds of snow and ice likely to bring feet of snow for some folks over the next couple of weeks as this snowy track continues across much of the country. And this could include major population centers in the Northeast, the Midwest, and potentially even into the Mid-Atlantic. Welcome in, everybody. My name is Gerald. I'm a meteorology major at the University of North Carolina, Charlotte. And if you haven't already, go ahead, like the video, subscribe, and hit that bell for the latest notifications. That's a great way to stay up to date as we continue to track this very active pattern ahead. And I'll tell you, some folks really going to cash in, including some areas that have had kind of a lackluster winter so far with your snowfall totals. That's about to change in a very big way. Now, you can see next to me, this is the latest run of our American GFS model showing that potential as we get storm after storm to track through the eastern United States. And I think that this will be a pretty common theme over the next 2 weeks or so. And like I said, by the time all is said and done, we're going to be counting those snowfall digits or snowfall totals rather in double digits, maybe even double feet. So meaning more than 1 or 2 feet of snow going to be very possible for many folks out of this pattern. Now, before we get to the stuff kind of this weekend and next week, yeah, we've got active weather already out there right now. Check out this storm system kind of already crossing through portions of the Mid-Atlantic, the Northeast, bringing snow, ice, and severe weather. We mentioned that yesterday. I said there could be a little bit of a severe risk. Yeah, well, guess what? It's happening right now through portions of Kentucky and West Virginia, depending on when you're watching this, of course. And that'll be something to definitely watch throughout the day today. Now, we'll keep on kind of looking at this in radar now. And yeah, let's zoom into it. Everywhere else in the country, pretty quiet right now, except for the eastern United States and up into Canada. Check out all that snow into Ontario, Quebec, up near Thunder Bay, and down near the Toronto area. And then we've even got snow in Utica, Albany, into Boston, Connecticut, Rhode Island getting some of that snow, and then an icy wintry mix through Philadelphia into New York City, and then back out towards Harrisburg, Williamsport, Scranton, and even Altoona getting in on some of that ice. And check this out, ice as far south as DC, Baltimore, and portions of northern and central Virginia. Yeah, it's a bit of a mess. And then you see this, yeah, that's a squall line that we're watching right behind it. So a very active storm system, and this is what happens when you get spring and winter to clash. Folks in the south this week experienced record highs, and then this storm system crossing that boundary, that's creating this pretty crazy dynamic weather that we're seeing. We just don't often see these types of differences in the type of weather we're seeing, from ice to, even severe weather. In fact, we had a tornado warning not long ago, only within about 100 miles or so of each other. So very, very interesting stuff. And just kind of a bit of a meteorological masterpiece to look at here this morning. Now, because of that, we have plenty of watches, warnings, and advisories on our current alerts map. You can see that here. Now, we've got those winter weather advisories in the purple colors. We've got ice storm warnings still in the burgundy colors. Now, the good news is most of this storm is done, and if you're watching this video, later this afternoon, then, we'll really be done with most of this. But again, check it out. We even had a tornado watch and a couple tornado warnings this morning down near Kentucky, and then an ice storm warning just to the east of there. So just very interesting stuff we don't see very often. And if you're thinking, all right, well, we're done with this, what's the big deal? Well, check what's coming behind it. Already newly issued winter storm watches for the Twin Cities, back through central Wisconsin into portions of South Dakota. Yeah, round 2 is on the way this weekend, and I think round 2 is going to produce even more snow than this one brought. By the way, let me know in the comments how much you've gotten out of the current storm system. Always love to hear those reports. And then out west, you can see newly issued winter storm warnings and winter weather advisories, all for the same storm that's going to impact the East Coast this weekend. And we'll talk about it on both coasts and kind of the coast to coast segment here in just a moment. But before we get there, let's go ahead and finish timing out kind of the rest of the current storm system with the latest model data, and we'll move this ahead into time. So later this morning, get the idea, that snow and ice line continuing to move north and east, an ice thumping of snow from Boston up into Concord, Montpelier, eventually into upstate New York, the down east areas of Maine. Could deal with some mixing by this afternoon in Boston. This is about 1 p.m. Eastern. You can kind of see that purple and that pink mixing in, especially down towards Connecticut, Rhode Island. Likely going to change to some ice, maybe even rain at the coast, but should stay mostly snow, I think, for Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, upstate New York. Now, another thing to watch here, that some of the models have been hinting at. See this little area down near Virginia? That's what's left over of that tornado-producing line of storms that we saw this morning. That could keep on going this afternoon. If you're in Danville, Greensboro, the Triad, and even into the mountains of North Carolina, watch out. That could try to hold together, and it's going to be moving into an environment that by this afternoon could be pretty warm and unstable. So we'll need to watch that potential later on today. Just kind of, again, a crazy weather day out there. So just stay prepared, be weather aware, have a way to get watches and warnings should the forecast get a little worse than maybe originally anticipated. But back up north for the snow, I mean, again, it's booking on out of here, folks. And by the time we get to this evening, 7, 8, 9 p.m., we're basically done with this storm system. And then tomorrow morning and afternoon, a reinforcing shot of cold air could bring some snow squalls on top of whatever snow you already got into the interior Northeast. Again, the usual suspect places: upstate New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, and a couple could break containment and try to make it to Connecticut, Rhode Island. And then some lake effect setting up off of Ontario there into the Tug Hill south of Watertown, New York. And you can kind of see that persisting through Friday and into Saturday. So that's the current ongoing storm. Let's switch gears now and talk about out west. And you're thinking, well, Gerald, you're talking about this train of storms in the east. Why do we care about the west? Well, one, obviously we care about what folks out here are experiencing. But two, what's happening out here is going to impact the east as we go into later this coming weekend. So here we go. This is basically what we're seeing out there right now. We've got a big low pressure system right off the coast of California, and this is going to be our northeastern storm this weekend. One of the beautiful things of weather is we can see where it's coming from and where it's going. And where it's coming from is the Pacific, and where it's going is first stop California, then the Rockies, then the Northern Plains, then the Northeast. So let's time it out for you. Here we go this afternoon and into this evening. Heavy snow into the Sierra Nevadas, up through NorCal, into the higher terrains there, into Oregon, and then eventually getting that snow up into the Cascades, the Northern Rockies. This is overnight tonight into tomorrow. That nice, heavy, fluffy snow that you love to see this time of year, especially up in ski country. Now, rain at the coast on this one, so LA could even pick up on a little rain. That's what we'll hope for, obviously, with the way the wildfire season has gone out here over the winter. Just really devastating stuff out there, so any rain helps. And then we get on into tomorrow morning here, a heavy Rocky Mountain snow continuing in the forecast throughout the day Friday. And then watch this storm finally get shoved out of the Rockies. This is overnight Friday, early Saturday. Here comes our low pressure, and with it, a nice band of snow to the north here through the Dakotas, Minnesota, areas I told you we have those winter storm watches newly issued. Yeah, this is why this storm going to work on through by Saturday, really overnight Friday into Saturday. And then after that, folks, we begin to calm down in the west a little bit. This is Saturday afternoon. Notice another little piece of energy bringing some snow into Oregon, Washington, the Northern Rockies here. But definitely a lot more quiet than maybe it has been. By the time we get to Sunday afternoon, we get a little bit of a lull out west. Now, let's talk about totals a little bit here. Biggest totals, I think, going to be in the Sierra Nevadas out here, where we could see feet of snow. So it's not just the Northeast that's going to see a lot of snow. Obviously, the usual suspects out west going to get in on the action too, talking about 3, 4, 5 feet of snow there in the Sierra Nevadas. And then the Northern Rockies in general going to cash in with the usual elevation-dependent type of event. So the higher up you go, the more snow you're going to get. Best way I would recommend getting your exact forecast is go to weather.gov, click on your exact coordinates, and that'll give you the best idea of how much snow your elevation is going to see. But plenty of snow nonetheless out west from this more La Nina-like pattern. All right, now that gets us into the nitty-gritty time for storm number 2. And if you're new to the channel, this is kind of how I like to format these things. Start with the upper levels, then go to the kind of global models and show what they're showing on the ground, and then talk about totals at the end. And that's how we're going to do it today once more. So this is Friday morning's forecast from the GFS model on our upper level vorticity map, and a couple areas I want to point out. So we've got this kind of trough working through the Northeast. That's providing another shot of fresh Arctic air or polar air. Either way, it's going to be cold. And then that area out west, this is the storm system we just talked about Friday morning, working ashore here at that time. So both of these pieces are going to be very important for the forecast for this weekend, but watch what happens to our area out west as we go ahead into time here. So again, this is Friday morning, moving into Friday afternoon, overnight Friday. Again, you can kind of see this area. Now, it's kind of a little messy and disorganized. For example, if you look up here where I've got this X, see how this is kind of a well-defined vortex. This area that we're looking at over the Rockies is a little more kind of ripped apart and shredded, but I will mention it is still more organized than the one we saw or the storm we're seeing today. This one has a little bit more oomph to it, if you will. You can see as we move it ahead into time here, it continues to stay, relatively disorganized, but as it moves east, becoming more organized. Here we go Saturday afternoon. Notice it's starting to tighten up a little bit here over Minnesota, Wisconsin, and eventually the lift associated with it. You see all this kind of action bubbling up over Pennsylvania, New Jersey. This is Saturday evening, a lot more closely associated to our upper level energy. And that tells me this storm's going to be stronger than today's storm, a lot more well-defined at the surface, and eventually crossing all the way through the northeast and strengthening as it does so here, and then probably even phasing off the coast and becoming a nice little nor'easter by the time we get to Sunday morning, and then pulling out by Sunday afternoon. So that's the upper levels. What is this going to look like at the surface? That's the million-dollar question. Well, here we go. Let's start at Saturday morning. Same model, GFS, so the one we just looked at the upper levels. This is what the lower levels look like on that model. And notice some precipitation beginning. Low pressure developing at the surface here. You can see that developing back towards Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri. We've got snow back up into Minnesota, Wisconsin, the Dakotas, and then this line of rain along our warm front that is kind of beginning to try to pull northward. So that's the setup Saturday morning. We'll go throughout the day, the storm strengthening. Remember, starting here at about 1,008 millibars and then working through the Ohio Valley by Saturday evening down to 1,005 millibars and well-defined fronts. That's the difference from this one and today's storm. We've got a well-defined cold front here, a well-defined warm front, and that warm air advection pushing north into that fresh Arctic air I told you about that's on the way Friday. That's going to really increase these precipitation totals. And we're going to get some heavy snow, I think, here into portions of Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, a classic slider type of setup here that we talk about sometimes, just meaning the storm is sliding perfectly, wow, I got tongue-tied there. Perfectly west to east, the storm is sliding. Well, that was fun. And then to the north here, you can see that big block of snow as that Arctic air is being overrun by this precipitation. And this is a classic setup for pretty good snow, potentially double-digit snow just out of this one storm, specifically into Massachusetts, the Hudson River Valley, maybe Connecticut, Rhode Island, into Vermont, New Hampshire, the down east areas of Maine. Yeah, I'm watching you for big snow. Now, my folks in DC, Baltimore, I think you're a little far south on this one. You can see the warm front a little bit too far north. So you're going to be in this warm sector. And I say warm, it might not necessarily be warm, but too warm for snow. Start going up towards Philly, though. I think that's going to be kind of the battleground here. Could start to snow, then to ice, then to rain, maybe. It would be that type of setup. New York City could be in a prime spot here for a beautiful all-snow event by the weekend. Now, a little far south, we'll watch the mixing, but let me show you this. Let me back this model up a little bit, and I know the screen's flashing a bunch right now, so I apologize. So this was a run a couple days ago for this storm, and then a newer run, newer, so on and so forth. But watch the trend here. See what the storm's done over the past couple model runs? See how it's come south? Yeah, we're dealing with a bit of a south trend, so that's good news for snow lovers in New York City, Connecticut, Rhode Island, the Cape area into Massachusetts. Not the best news up into Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire. You might be losing some precipitation here, but the trend is your friend if you're in that kind of major population area from Boston to New York City. That's where I think could really get one of the better storms, if not the best storm so far this year, as this slides on through. And then even on the backside here, some good back end snow by Sunday morning, and then out of here by Sunday afternoon on the GFS model. Now, let me quickly show you the European as well, give you kind of a taste of both of them. And here we go. Same thing, folks. Same storm. A little bit stronger on the European, or even more well-defined cold front here. So I am watching the potential for some severe weather Saturday evening. If you're in Tennessee, Kentucky, really the same places that are getting it right now, let's watch this. Again, not a huge threat right now. But we've got that warm, moist air returning northward. We've got a strong front. Obviously, you get those two things to interact, and you need to be careful. Now, same thing on the European. A little bit of an ice zone here into Pennsylvania to watch, then transitioning to heavy snow in northern New Jersey, New York City, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and yes, some snow in Vermont as well, but probably lighter, at least on this model. Even some heavy snow up into the Finger Lakes, and the storm keeps on moving and sliding. That heavy snow getting up into Boston, into western Mass, much of Connecticut, all the way down to Bridgeport, into Rhode Island, into the Cape, out towards Nantucket, getting heavy snow. A little bit further north on the European, so we get some mixing issues in New York City, northern New Jersey, back towards Scranton, Philadelphia, kind of holding on to icy, rainy mix here by this time overnight Saturday. And then the storm, again, kind of pulls on out of here. But all things considered, pretty similar run to the GFS, and watch the storm crank up as it leaves. This could be a good storm for Nova Scotia as well, for our friends up in Canada. Now, one more thing I'll show you here. Again, the screen's going to flash a little bit here, so I apologize, but it's the same trend on the European. Here's a couple runs ago, and I keep moving it ahead. Watch the storm. It's continuing to shift south. So this is an older run, and then these are the newer runs. Yeah, that's good news for New York City. Again, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island. I really do think somewhere right into this area could get a double-digit snow out of this one, meaning more than 10 inches, maybe even more than a foot just out of one storm. But I think overall speaking, this is going to be one of those classic kind of 5 to 10 inch events. And with that said, let's go ahead and take a look at some potential totals. Now, the storms this weekend, today's Thursday, so we've got a little bit of time, but I feel confident enough in the storm and close enough to go ahead and give you some preliminary snowfall totals. So we'll go ahead and do that for you on this Thursday. Now, this is the European model for the mid, or I guess, well, some people might consider this a Midwest. I'm going to call this the Northern Plains here, and you can see a nice little swath of snow out of this one into the Dakotas, really right along the line here and into southern North Dakota, and then a big swath out here into Minnesota and towards Wisconsin. That's the European model out this area. Here's the GFS just for comparison. More snow into northern South Dakota. Taking a look at the icon, a nice swath of snow. So you get the point here. A good area is going to get a pretty good dump of snow here. I would say 3 to 5 inches. I know some of these totals are more like 5 to 7, but we'll start conservative here and say this area is going to be a good little 3 to 5 inch snowstorm. And then I'll put the plus, meaning we could go up from there for sure on some of the model guidance as we get a little bit closer. Now let's move it east a little bit and talk about the ice threat a little. I know we don't want to hear about ice, but it is going to be a concern with this storm as well. Now, I'm not overly concerned. You can see an area in here of really what looks more like a glaze to 1/10 of an inch here from Chicago into the Indianapolis area, back up towards Detroit, into portions of Ohio. Seeing that potential there out of this storm. Not a big deal by any means, but enough that we will continue to watch it. I think these numbers are about right probably in that forecast. Now, snow, our friends up in Michigan, Wisconsin. I know I just talked a lot about the Northeast, not to leave you out. You're going to get a pretty good storm out of this as well. Look at the European here, a nice swath of snow into northern and central Wisconsin, back down into northern kind of mitten there of Michigan. This in here, I'm going to go a little bit higher. I'll say a 4 to 7 inch event for this area. I'm feeling a little bit more confident in here. We're going to get a good snow. Again, about 4 to 7 inches. That's more than enough to cause some problems out there and definitely be a nice little storm, especially for you folks right into this area. We have not seen much snow this winter, kind of into the heart of Michigan here. We've seen some lake effect in the UP. We've seen some lake effect in the western shores, but kind of this central area has been left out a little bit. So this will be a good storm for you. Same story here for northern Wisconsin. Unfortunately, Chicago, probably a little too far south with this one. But if we look at some other models, here's the GFS. Again, really not doing much for Chicago. The Canadian, really like the European, just even higher on the totals. And then the icon here, I think is about right as well. And I'll even show you the UK Met. But Chicago, I don't know what it is. You can't get a big winter storm to save your life. But to your north, we'll get some good snow. So if you're willing to take a drive, definitely go for it. All right, now the Northeast, ice in here. This is the blend of models. I think this is an all right assumption. Once again, for whatever reason, 2 storms in a row. I think Pennsylvania is going to be the hot spot for ice, specifically back down near the Alleghenies, Harrisburg State College. We're probably going to get a little less snow there and more ice, and that could even get as far south as maybe the Mason-Dixon line. Now, you're seeing some ice down here into Maryland, Virginia, West Virginia. This is actually really from the storm we have right now, not so much the next storm. Unfortunately, I can't move the map ahead to pretend like the ongoing storm isn't going to happen. But most of this, I think, is really from the current storm that's already working through right now or already over, depending on when you're watching this. With that said, though, again, do think Pennsylvania is going to get another area of maybe about 1/10 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch of ice out of this next storm, which is more than enough to cause problems. Now, the fun stuff. Snowfall totals. Yeah, it's looking pretty good. This is the latest European model. A big spread here, or a big area, I should say, of 1/2 foot to about 10 inches of snow showing up into Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, the Hudson River Valley there of New York, and then up into northern New Jersey, right along the New York kind of Pennsylvania line there. New York City, you're right on the line here. The model's going with about, we'll say, maybe 4, 5, 6 inches in Manhattan. Philadelphia, not really much at all. So you get the idea. It's going to be a sharp gradient. Boston, 8 inches. Really much of Connecticut, about 8 to 10 inches or so of snow on this model. This is the European. What about the GFS? Looks pretty similar, folks. They're kind of locked in here. Again, the totals are pretty well in line. It's a matter of where it's going to happen. A good swath here of half a foot to a foot of snow going to be pretty likely, but does it shift a little bit further south like the models have continued, or does it kind of stop the trend here and kind of end where it's at now? If that were the case, then New York City are right on the line of big snow, but if we get just a couple more ticks south, then you could be in this half a foot to a foot range, and that's what we'll watch out for. Icon model, I'll show you this one as well. Icon a little bit further south. That's good news for New York City. Taking a look at the latest NAM model, that's in now. Also a little bit further south and better looking for New York City. The Canadian here, a big storm into Massachusetts, Vermont, New Hampshire, into upstate New York, and then the UK Met even looking really good for New York City in that half a foot range. So I know I keep mentioning New York City here, but that's one of the tougher forecast areas. If you're to the north, kind of along the I-95 up towards Boston, feeling pretty good. You're going to get half a foot to a foot of snow out of this. If you're down south towards Philadelphia, feeling pretty good. You're not going to get a whole lot of snow out of this. However, again, if we keep shifting this thing south, that could change. So just to kind of go back and, give you my final little initial forecast here. I think the European right here, this is about right. I think you can't really get a much better look than this. A nice swath right into this region of about half a foot to a foot of snow, going to be pretty easy to come by. And that's my early forecast outside of there. Up to the north, probably a little less. And then to the south, a very sharp gradient in this area where it could be it could go from really nothing to higher in snowfall totals pretty quickly. So that's kind of what we're looking at for the second storm. All right, if you thought that was all, I hate to burst your bubble, or maybe, this is good news for you. We've got another storm early next week to start tracking here. Let's go ahead and time this one out for you. Now, the difference with this next week's storm and kind of what's happening now is going to be the track. The storm currently and this weekend storm pretty similar in their location. Next week, it looks a little different. Notice our trough digging a lot further west out here, or a lot further south, out west rather. This is by late Monday morning, and this is going to be the next storm system. Watch where it goes here, all that energy, and it's just a big area of kind of lift right through the Ohio Valley, through the Tennessee Valley, and shooting up towards the northeast, where we've got that cold air in place. And if you thought that was all, look behind it. Another big storm system right behind that one. This is next Tuesday afternoon. Folks, we've got them lined up out here. And this is why I'm calling it a train of snow, is because it really is. It's just nonstop. It's like whenever you're stuck in a railroad track and you're thinking, all right, the train's almost over now. And then 5 minutes later, you're still watching the train go by. That's what this pattern kind of feels like. It's just storm system after storm system, and we time it out here. Look at the track for next week. Yeah, that's a nice looking storm by next Thursday, Friday. This would be a potentially good little Valentine's Day storm, which is next Friday, I believe. You can see that big trough out here and then all the lift ahead of it. So it looks to stay active here in the storm energy map, and I'll give you a little sneak peek. We're not going to go super in depth on this just due to the fact we got to get through the weekend storm first, but here's what next week could look like. So Monday morning, you can see what is a pretty easy boundary to spot. Basically right in here is the boundary. To the north, it's all cold Arctic air, and to the south, it's more warm spring-like air, and what happens is our storm systems love to track right along the boundary itself and kind of feed off of the baroclinic instability, as we call it, just meaning that clash of air masses. It likes to feed off of that, and that's exactly what's going to happen next week. So watch the GFS. It's wave after wave of frozen precip. See even a little bit of frozen stuff, maybe some snow Monday morning in Virginia, potentially as far south as the North Carolina state line. Again, the closer to the boundary you are, the tougher a forecast this is going to be, because you could be right on the cold side or right on the warm side. And that's obviously where, a forecast can kind of blow up in your face. But I do think by Monday night into Tuesday, check out this bigger storm system forming. Kansas, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, the Virginias, Ohio. Yeah, this is a nice looking Ohio Valley storm. And look at the Mid-Atlantic by Tuesday afternoon of next week. I mean, it doesn't get better than this for the DMV, Delmarva, the Philly area through much of New Jersey, rides up the coast by Tuesday night. I mean, this will bring tears to your eyes if you're a snow lover in coastal New Jersey, Long Island, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Boston. I mean, just a beautiful look there. And then also, unfortunately, some ice. I am watching the ice concern into kind of the foothills of Virginia, maybe as far south as the foothills of North Carolina. That might be cutting it a little bit close here. But we had a south trend on the weekend storm, so it could happen with this one. Not out of the question. And that could lead to ice further south. So I'll go ahead and circle an area in here. Right into here is where I would say we have the highest or the lowest confidence rather, I guess. Right now, it looks like rain for most of us in that region, but could this shift to more of an ice event? Absolutely could. And we'll need to watch that. Again, this is, not quite a week away, but still that 4 to 5 day time frame. and that gives us time to kind of keep on tracking it. Then the storm pulls on up the coast. That's just storm number 1 next week. Check it out. Another one right after it, a little bit further northern track on that, and then another storm by Valentine's Day. So it looks very active next week. I'll show you the European as well, just to say I did, and kind of give you, a look at multiple models. Here we go. Storm beginning to crank up. This is Tuesday morning, a little bit further north on the European again, but then pulls up the coast. It looks very similar. And then another storm right after that one. This one with a bigger severe weather threat by the Valentine's Day time frame. You can see a pretty potent squall line. This would be a week from today, next Thursday afternoon. We would need to watch that for severe weather, and then obviously snow to the north. So a very, very active look on the models here through at least the middle of February, potentially even longer than that. And you'll notice with the ice signal for next week as well, it looks pretty active, especially from Virginia down into North Carolina, back through Kentucky. And I say down into North Carolina, and you're thinking, well, there's not much showing up here. Again, I would watch for that cold air to overperform a little bit, and areas like Hickory, Greensboro, the Triad could try to get in on some of that icy action for next week. Not a guarantee. We're just kind of trying to preemptively predict some of those possible trends. But the bigger ice concern, I think, will be into the mountains of Virginia, West Virginia, and potentially portions of the Ohio Valley. Then you start talking about snowfall totals. And check it out here on the European. Not going to get in depth on the totals, but watch just the track here. A big swath of snow likely from Kansas and Missouri all the way up into the mid-Atlantic. And I think specifically Philadelphia, into DC, Baltimore, New Jersey. That could be a real hotspot next week for higher end snowfall totals out of this pattern. And notice next week, folks, I mean, it hangs around. There's one wave, then another wave, and then kind of another wave by next weekend. It's just a very active pattern here in the snowfall world. Now, final thing we'll talk about today are temperatures. Spring fever to the south, cold air to the north. That's been the theme. That will continue to stay the theme here out of this pattern. So here we go. We've got that warm air into the south this weekend. We've got cooler air to the north. All of that keeps on happening here into early next week. And you can see by kind of Sunday into Monday, here's that boundary I was telling you about. Look at this. We've got warm air into the Carolinas, Georgia, Alabama, down through the Gulf Coast. And then we've got that cooler air to the north through the Ohio Valley into the Northeast, and then well back up into the Rockies by the early part of next week. And it'll probably stay that way for much of next week. And then we're watching towards the middle of the month a bit of a potential kind of Arctic outbreak that could really spread over the east as a whole by about we'll say the 17th through the 20th, that time frame. You can see a lot more blue showing up on the map, and then maybe that'll bring snow chances back to the south. We'll just kind of have to wait and see. Alrighty, folks, that's all I got for you on this, what day of the week is it? Thursday, February 6th. And with that said, if you haven't already, and you did, go ahead, if you haven't already and you did like the video, actually hit the like button, and then go ahead and subscribe and hit the bell for the latest notifications. And let's keep on trucking on through February with some awesome growth, and keep on hoping for some big snowstorms for those of you that want them. Alrighty, folks, that's all I got for you on this Thursday. Have a great one. Stay safe, stay warm, and I'll see you all next time.